Hello, everybody. Thanks to Joseph for reading my work. Thanks to Adriana for inviting me to read some of my writing. I'm happy to be included in this group of artists, and I'm disappointed I won't be able to hear their work. I'm sorry I can't be there today, but a friend of mine is getting married and I am currently at the rehearsal dinner. I have a few preparatory remarks, and then I wanted to share a piece that was published in Freeze magazine for their 200th issue. They asked writers, artists, critics, and so on to weigh in on something that had inspired them. I chose Paul Beatty's The Sellout. It is easier to tear something down than to build, because building takes consistency and it takes faith. And faith is not a very cool idea. It means that you believe in something bigger than yourself as you are now. It is safe to choose what you know, or what has been known, which is that language breaks down, people are misunderstood, we will disappoint one another, and what is inevitable is what already is. And if you do start to rally up the belief that your words or your work might in fact do some good, we are told to forget about contentious things because we won't win over anyone. We are told that to talk about it only draws more attention to a sore subject, as if somehow avoiding a wound is better than cleaning it out. We have been taught that telling difficult truths will only make our lives difficult without challenging the lives of others. This is not true. Cultivating an active language of truth might indeed make your life more difficult, but hopefully you weren't writing to make your life easier in the first place. An active language of truth will also seed the minds of others that their language is possible too. It is one thing to read the works of those recently and long past. It is entirely different to read the work of those currently writing, thinking, and living. As much as we might think that we are capable of the empathic leaps that would allow us to reconstruct the world in order to feel the radicality of prior writers, I think they have less of an ethical claim on us than those writing alongside us. Our peers invite us, implore us to write alongside them. I am thankful to be writing alongside you all. Nevertheless, we must read our predecessors. With that, here is an excerpt of June Jordan's essay, Problems of Language in a Democratic State. Thanks to the artist Salome Sega for turning me on to this essay. We have begun to live in the land of Polyphemus. Poor Polyphemus. He was this ugly and gigantic one-eyed cyclops who liked to smash human beings on rocks and then eat them. But one day, he happened to capture the wily and very restless Ulysses, who, one night, gave Polyphemus so much wine that the poor lunk fell into a drunken sleep. Taking advantage of his adversary's discomposure, Ulysses and a couple of his buddies seized a great stick and heated its tip in the nearby, handily burning fire. When the tip was glowing hot, Ulysses and his buddies stuck that thing into the one eye of Polyphemus, twisting it deeply into that socket and blinding him. Polyphemus howled a terrible howl. He was in much pain. "What is the name of the man who has done this to me?" he cried, and the wily Ulysses answered him, "My name is no one." Later, several other Cyclops raced up to Polyphemus because they had heard him howling. "Who did this to you?" they asked. Polyphemus screamed his accusation for the world to hear. "No one has done this to me." Well, when the fellow Cyclops heard that, they decided that if no one had done this to Polyphemus, it must be the will of the gods. Hence nothing could or should be done about the blinding of Polyphemus, and so nothing was done. And after a while, Ulysses and his men escaped, unnoticed by the blinded Cyclops. I share this story with you because it remains one of my favorites, and because it was the only reason I stayed awake during my second year of Latin. And I tell you about Polyphemus because we seem determined to warp ourselves into itty-bitty imitations of his foolishness. To repeat, the other Cyclopses decided that if no one had done anything, then nothing was to be done. What happened to him represented the will of the gods. I worry about that notion of a democratic state. Do we really believe 11.5% unemployment represents God's will? Is that why the powerful say unemployment has emerged? If that construction strikes your ear as somehow ridiculous, because, quite rightly, it conjures up the phenomenon of unemployment as if it emerges from nowhere into nothing, then what sense do you make of this very familiar construction used very often by the powerless? I lost my job. Who in his or her right mind loses a job? What should I understand if you say something like that to me? Should I suppose that one morning you got up and drank your coffee and left the house, but then you just couldn't find your job? If that's not what anybody means, then why don't we say GM laid off half the night shift. They fired me. Who did what to whom? Who's responsible? And now I'm going to read Ajay's second text. Paul Beatty, The Sellout, 2015, by Ajay Kurian. In 2015, I realized I am a monkey. As long as I can remember, this was a vague concern of mine, occasionally coming into sharp focus, like when I looked in the mirror once and caught how low my arms hang, or when my schoolmate told me I had jungle stink. There were clues littered about my life, but the paranoia was like a constant nervous headache. My realization was freeing, as if all the paranoias about whether I was, in fact, a person had finally transformed into the security of my newly accepted, feces-throwing, lice-picking monkey life. I had denied it long enough. It all came to a head in 2015 when I read a book that changed my life, Paul Beatty's novel, The Sellout. It tells the story of a young black man who grew up in Dickens, a fictional rural area of Compton, Los Angeles. The town has been struck from the map of California, and in order to restore Dickens to its rightful place, Beatty's narrator, Bon Bon, or The Sellout, or Me, all names he goes by, enslaves his neighbors. Hominy Jenkins, the fictitious understudy to the actor who played Buckley on the 1950s US television show The Little Rascals, and segregates the local bus line and high school. I should explain. Like Richard Wright before him, Beatty has addressed the commitment to criminality as the moment of liberation. In Wright's novel Native Son, 1940, it's an act of murder that finally frees Bigger Thomas from his pangs of frustration, fear, and confusion. Having lived his entire life as a suspect, after Bigger kills a woman, a walk down the street suddenly feels as pleasant as a stroll on a bright autumn day. His minor acts of aggression have relented, and he feels sudden release. There is power, Wright observes, in committing the crime you are already suspected of. Similarly, Beatty's Bon Bon revisits the supposed freedom of a post-race United States by enacting civic institutions long thought to be dead, slavery and segregation. Bon Bon's new world is upended, and Beatty's ensuing tour of racialized existence is not only hilarious, but bitingly on point. Beatty's greater and perhaps most surreal move is not to stop at the enslavement of hominy, but to continue to invoke racial stereotypes and cliches. Whiteness not only presumes criminality among people of color, but is suspicious of nearly all forms of their behavior: food choices, leisure choices, jobs, liquor preference, types of sneakers, favorite flicks and favorite teams. Beatty confirms these suspicions and more. Yes, black people do this. Yes, Latinos do that. Yes, the Chinese prefer this. Yes, Indians always say that. The overwhelming racial confirmations and inversions that are peppered throughout The Sellout maintains a logic that hovers between the perversely surreal and the deeply fucking real. Beatty taught me to embrace my fears and paranoias and make them true rather than live with the consternation. I do smell like the crusted curry on my fingertips. I am a terrorist. I am the monkey sitting next to you at this Michelin star restaurant about to throw his shit because yes, I can finally say it. Yes, I am a monkey. That's what monkeys do. I'm just sick of it. Best, Ajay.